business. So let's get into it. All right, Will.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, guys. Yeah, really excited for today's session. Obviously, Porter Erisman, the former VP of Alibaba, is here with us today. So really cool bonus session. Very high-level person here today. Definitely take advantage of this, guys. Everything Alibaba with Porter Erisman. Going to talk about how he grew into an e-commerce giant and the principles that are really growing their business into the future. So like I said, Porter Erisman, former VP of Alibaba. He's the author of Alibaba's World, which a lot of you, I know Kyle's already talking about. If you guys want to check that out, just go to Amazon and type in Alibaba's World, or go to StartupBros.com/Porter, and that'll take you right there. And he also has a documentary, which I forgot to finish the name of. It's a Crocodile in the Yangtze. I'm sure I'm saying that wrong. But if you want to check that out, just type that into Google, or go to StartupBros.com/movie. So Porter really had, obviously, the inside look at Alibaba during the growth of the company and into the e-commerce giant it is today. So he's going to tell us a lot of stories, give us some insight into how that company grew, the principles that drove their growth, and kind of the beliefs and principles that are driving their growth into the future. So without any further ado, I don't want to take up any more of Porter's time today. So let me switch it over to him. See if I have it. All right, cool. So Porter, you should be able to share your screen now. And guys, I'll be hanging out in the question box with Kyle. So if you guys have any questions, obviously we'll be in there hanging out with you guys. And hopefully, Porter, can you hear us and everything? Yeah, sorry, I think we can hear you.
Yeah, I got it. Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yeah, perfect. And then,
okay. Well, thanks so much.
Yeah, do you know how to share your screen there?
Yeah, about to do that.
Awesome, cool. Yeah, I'll turn it over to you. Thanks, man.
No problem. Is my screen showing up, guys?
Not yet.
Okay. Let's see here.
There should be on the little panel, it should say, there should be like a little show my screen button with a play button above it.
Yeah, let's see. I just had that and I pushed show my screen. Are you getting it now?
Yeah, we got it now. Perfect.
Okay. Yeah, well, so great. So yeah, it's my first time on the go-to seminar, so if there's anything that comes up technically that isn't looking right, please everyone let me know. But anyways, I want to go ahead and start with the presentation, and so thanks so much Will and Kyle for bringing me here for this webinar, because I joined Alibaba in 2000. I was there from 2000 until 2008, and I was a vice president in a number of different roles. One of the roles was actually running the operations for the English language website that I suppose most of you all are using. And we had a vision and a dream, you could say, which was we wanted to create a community of importers and exporters, of entrepreneurs, and give them the tools to find business partners and trade products and do business internationally, to sort of buy in one country, sell in another country. And it was this vision of a sort of seamless economy where manufacturers and entrepreneurs could connect up. And so to be here talking to this group and seeing your names up here on the list, it's just very satisfying, because this original vision that we had, it shows that it's already, it's really taken off to a level that there's entire communities rallying around this. So it's really exciting. So hopefully today, what I'm going to walk you through, I'll sort of tell you what I can talk about really well, and then other things that even Will and Kyle probably even could talk about better than me, which is I was there for 8 years, and I can really give, hopefully, the bird's eye view of how Alibaba got started, how it grew to what it is today. It's actually a very inspiring story of entrepreneurship that I think people can get some lessons from. But also, I think by learning this story, you may learn a little bit more about just e-commerce in general, doing business with China. And I probably won't get too much into features and functions on the site. Even when I was at Alibaba, there were people who our users knew how to use the site better than we did a lot of times, because you all are in the trenches every day, contacting suppliers, negotiating with them, and we were just running the platform. So, of course, I'll try my best to answer any really specific questions, but probably I'm better for the questions that are related to the rise of Alibaba and the bigger picture kind of issues. So let me go ahead and get started here. So is my next slide showing up, guys? Yeah.
Yeah, we're seeing Alibaba, the inside story. One thing, it looks like you have your force quit menu up.
Oh.
With GoToWebinar highlighted. That might be a little in the danger zone.
Yeah.
If you
Are we off there? Yeah, okay. Oh, so you're seeing everything here. Okay.
Great.
Do you see my second slide?
Yep, now we're seeing, looks like the IPO.
Okay, great. So, sorry if I seem like an old man here. You know, I ran a tech, a website, but was never the tech guy. So, I'm still catching up to you youngsters online here. So, anyways, this next slide.
No, this is.
Okay, great. So, this next slide is really, you can see these are scenes from the IPO of Alibaba last year, and I think it really caught a lot of people's attention. Maybe people already using Alibaba, it wasn't such a big surprise, but Alibaba had its IPO. It raised $25 billion. It was the largest IPO in history, and people began to realize that, in China on Alibaba's consumer websites, they now handle more transactions than eBay and Amazon combined. And of course, the B2B import-export website, Alibaba.com, is a big part of this story. And so I think the big question people had when they saw this was really, how did this happen? And I think because Alibaba was in China for so long that unless you're doing import-export, people didn't really know much about it. But of course, my book answers that question in detail, but today I'm going to sort of summarize some of the key points for you all. And so what I'm going to talk about today is Alibaba, the inside story, the China model of e-commerce, which will discuss some of the consumer model, but some of the B2B import-export model, what's going on in China and other emerging markets, and then lessons that entrepreneurs can take from Alibaba's experience. So hopefully this will be a good overview for you all. And so I'll go ahead and just sort of introduce myself, why I'm doing what I'm doing, what I've been doing. So I joined Alibaba in 2000, like I said, and as I was getting ready to leave the company in 2008, I sat down with Jack Ma, the founder of Alibaba, and I said, look, I was a witness to a story I think is really inspiring for entrepreneurs. What I'd like to do after leaving Alibaba is take some time to tell the story, share it with students, and share it with entrepreneurs. I said, would that be okay with you if I did that? And he said, sure. You're probably the best person because you were an American working in a Chinese company, so you saw the international side, you saw the China side. And I said, but Jack, you realize I'm telling the story in an independent way with all the ups and downs, successes and the mistakes. Are you sure that you're okay with that? And he said, yeah, please go ahead. I think you understand the story best, so go for it. And I think because Jack Ma started his career as an English teacher, he sort of felt that Alibaba had a responsibility that people could learn from its successes and mistakes. And so after I left Alibaba, first I tried to pitch a book idea back in 2008, and I didn't get a publisher right away. And so I said, okay, maybe I'm going to make a documentary instead. So I gathered 200 hours of footage from the company's history that different news organizations had captured. I got the rights to what I needed rights to. I made a documentary and then traveled the world for 2 years showing the documentary. So it took me to 25 different countries, and I got to meet entrepreneurs. And what I really saw is that this entrepreneurial spirit is really universal. And I think there are probably a lot of you out there who are just getting started. Maybe you have a day job, but you're sort of dabbling in some ideas. And I just share with you that no matter where you go in the world, this is sort of the human spirit, this entrepreneurial spirit, and that's why I think e-commerce really captures it. So I got to see that over 2 years, And then last year, a publisher approached me and said, "Hey, Porter, have you ever thought of doing a book about your experience?" And I said, "Funny you should ask, because there's so much about Alibaba's history and its rise that I think people can learn from." But of course, I didn't have footage for all of that. So I agreed to do a book, and the book really goes behind the scenes of Alibaba, telling the good and the bad, all kinds of sort of behind closed door negotiations and meetings, so that people can see what Alibaba went through, but also what Google went through in China, what eBay went through in China, and even Yahoo and a little bit of Amazon. So that's sort of how I got to where I am today. The book just came out a few days ago, and you're one of the first groups I'm talking to about it, and that's how I got here. So where does the Alibaba story begin? So really, it starts in 1999. Back in 1999, there were really only two e-commerce companies people were talking about in the world. There was Amazon, and that was the year that Jeff Bezos was on the cover of Time magazine as the person of the year, and also eBay. So there were these two companies out there that everyone knew about, and it was assumed they would sort of be the two big leaders in global e-commerce. Well, at this time, in 1999, China was really, e-commerce was almost inconceivable. At that time, less than 1% of the population in China was even using the internet. People didn't use credit cards, so e-commerce grew in the West through credit cards, but in China, people weren't using credit cards. There was also really poor logistics, so all the things that we have today with logistics, Amazon fulfillment, or really great shipping, it wasn't there. People thought the government would try to control the internet. And a big one is people in China and internationally, they just didn't trust each other enough to do deals, especially in import-export at like wholesale volumes. And then finally, it was assumed all the internet experts are in Silicon Valley. So it was up against that backdrop that Jack Ma, the founder of Alibaba, he gathered his co-founders. There were 17 co-founders along with Jack. He gathered some of them in his apartment to give a speech about what he thought Alibaba's vision should be and how they should try to face all of these big hurdles they're facing. And so, fortunately, someone then said, "Hey, what we're doing may be really historic, so why don't we take a video of the speech just in case we become really big and someday people can look at that as a piece of history." And so I'm going to try now, let's see if it works on the GoTo platform. I'm going to try to play for you this video of Jack Ma addressing these troops, trying to encourage them to overcome all those hurdles I mentioned to you when they started Alibaba. So why don't we go ahead and give this video a shot.
Shoot, Porter,
Yeah,
is the video playing on your end?
yeah, it's not playing for you guys?
I don't know if it's going to be able to, um, I don't know if we're going to be able to show it. I'm so sorry.
That's all right. Okay, am I still live with everyone though?
Yes, yeah,
Yep,
we
okay.
hear you loud and clear. Maybe even if you have links to these videos
Yeah.
that we can share with everybody, include with the recording.
No problem. So actually, this video that I wanted to show, this first day speech, it's available online on Vimeo and YouTube. So what I'll do is I'll send you that, and then you can share it with the group. and then we can focus on the discussion instead. But what I would say, I'll sort of summarize what Jack was talking about in the speech, which is basically he's just encouraging the team in the face of a lot of adversity, telling them that, yeah, even though e-commerce was still totally new in China, that they could become just as big, that they could even compete against the U.S. internet giants, including Amazon and eBay. And in the video, he actually predicted that eBay stock would fall, that Yahoo stock would fall, and that someday they could become the leader of e-commerce. So it's fun to see because actually a lot of his predictions came true, and so as the people listening to this are looking at their own businesses, they can begin to think, you know, what is the long-term vision that they have, and Alibaba is a pretty good case study of how that can work. So if it works for you guys, I'll provide the link, and then you all can watch it online if you'd like. Does that work?
Yeah, is that the Jack Ma's first day speech?
Yeah, I will.
Cool.
I'll
I
send
actually
that after.
Yeah, I actually already found the link for you. So yeah, that's in the chat box for you guys. If you just scroll down, you'll see Jack Ma's first day speech. Just click that, and you can watch that. So yeah, that's awesome.
I encourage you all to stick with me right now during this, and then afterwards
definitely.
would be a great time.
Yeah,
for the
good
video.
point. Good point.
Okay. So so I'll just go ahead and walk through from there. So what happened with Alibaba from that moment, from that first day in the apartment? Well, I'm going to walk you through a little bit the Alibaba story. So Alibaba started in 1999 as a global business-to-business platform. You know, the idea was to connect buyers, sellers, manufacturers, suppliers with importers and exporters and trading companies for them to do business globally. And it was funny because at that time there were a lot of other similar websites out there, but Alibaba happened to be the one that survived. And I think it's because of the key insight that Alibaba had, which is Alibaba's view is that it's a website that should provide tools to buyers and sellers, and especially to its sellers, it took a trade show perspective. So if you can see on the screen the slide with the trade show, probably a lot of you have been to trade shows, but this is obviously how import and export started, is people would fly to China every year or fly to another country, and inside the trade show everyone had a booth with all the different product samples up there, and you meet and you talk to the seller, and it was a very human experience. So the reason I'm saying this is because when you look at what eBay's platform is and what Amazon's platform is, they actually do a lot to keep the buyer and seller kind of blind to each other, and they don't, in my view, they don't give the seller much opportunity to communicate and negotiate or do much branding. But Alibaba's sort of DNA from the very early days was the seller was the customer, and so we try to empower sellers with all the tools to do business online. But a really important thing we realized is import-export, obviously, as you all know, is different from a consumer online retail. So we viewed it like a dating site, where you don't go online on a dating site and click one button and decide to get married to a husband or wife like that. A dating site is really where people go and they get the initial introduction, but it's still up to the possible husband and wife to get to know each other, to do due diligence, to build a relationship, and decide on their own. So the first thing, I know there was a question about how should you use Alibaba. This is kind of basic, but for people just getting started, a way to think of it is not like Amazon, that you order 10,000 things right away. It's that this is a dating site where you can get to know the supplier and get information about them and their products, but before making a commitment, you obviously want to get to know the supplier a little bit in some way. But Alibaba really started as an online trade show, and it's not just sellers from China selling to the rest of the world. There will be people in France selling to people in Uzbekistan, or people in India buying from people in Nigeria. So it's very global, but the vast majority of the revenues that Alibaba gets are from the suppliers in China. Those are the gold suppliers. And so we made the website free, and with the idea that let's build this critical mass of people who can post their products and services, get as many people using it as possible, make it free, learn from their experience, and then once our buyers and sellers started to make money off the site, we would start to make money off the site. And the way that developed was, suppliers were out there with their free listings, but buyers wanted more information about the suppliers, like a trust, a verification. Is this the real supplier? Does this person actually work for the company he's representing? Does this supplier really have a factory, or is it just a trading company pretending to have a factory? And of course, suppliers wanted to stand out, because if you just have a little company, you want us to be able to stand out from other companies. Or especially if you have a big factory, you want to show that you have all these great resources and facilities to give better confidence to the buyer. So that's how Alibaba started, as an online trade show. There's a Chinese language site for domestic wholesale in China, but most of you probably don't use that. It's more about the import-export website. So that's kind of the facts of the business, but I want to share with you some of the stories that are in the book that maybe you don't know just using the site. So the first is about how Jack Ma got started. So Alibaba, was started by this guy Jack Ma, who trained to be an English teacher. He failed his college entrance exams twice before he finally got into college, and then he went to college and once he graduated, he became an English teacher, and for 5 years he was just teaching English. But then one day he said, I'm teaching my students from just books, but I'm not teaching from any real life experience. So he decided he'd wanted to get into business to learn so that he could get life experience to take back to his students. And so the first company he started was a translation company, helping factories in China translate their catalogs. And he came to the U.S. To help with a deal that had not gone very well, and he came as a translator. So the first time he went to the U.S. in 1995 was as a translator. He went to L.A., and he found out that the business partner he was supposed to work with, he started to feel he might be a con man, and he got really scared because this guy started flashing a gun at him. And so Jack sort of fled to Seattle and stayed with a family he knew. And when he was in Seattle, that's where they introduced him to the internet. So once he saw the internet, he said, wow, a light bulb went off, and he realized that he would create an internet company helping connect Chinese sellers with businesses overseas. So the first company he started in 1995 was China's first internet company. It's called China Pages. It actually failed, but then I'm sure people listening to this have had their first experience not go well sometimes. But then Jack, finally in 1999, he said, I'm going to try again, and he started Alibaba.com. And so they started in the apartment with their 17 of their friends, and it started to take off pretty quickly. And right about that time, so now I'm going to tell you the story of how I found Alibaba. I was working in Beijing for an advertising company, and I wanted to join a startup, just like a lot of you have your own startups. I wanted to join a startup. A friend told me that there was an English teacher from the middle of China who wanted to build a global business, and I thought it would be fun because I'd been working with foreign companies coming into China, and so I thought it would be fun to help a Chinese company go global. So I went to Shanghai, and I went to a customer event with a lot of the suppliers who use Alibaba, so your counterparts. And there seemed to be a lot of excitement because you can imagine how hard it was for these sellers to find a buyer for their products. And finally the internet and Alibaba had opened up this door. So that's why Jack Ma called it Alibaba, is because he thought it was like saying open sesame to sellers who want to find business opportunities online. So I joined in 2000. I joined with a number of international staff, but I think because the cultural differences, a lot of the international staff didn't stay on for very long. So one of the things I noticed on Will's presentation that I saw online, his free webinar was, which is amazing. It's actually really, really helpful. But he talked about how important it is to respect Chinese culture, and I think whether you're an employee of a Chinese company or you're a business partner, to be humble and friendly, and to sort of give face to the Chinese suppliers, but of course be tough negotiator. But I found that there's a different way of fitting in China, and it's not standing out and being pushy and bossy. It's about fitting in and building a relationship sometimes before you do a deal. So I joined. A lot of the Western managers who joined left within a year, and we went through a really tough time at Alibaba. So in about 2000, after the internet bubble burst, the company was really struggling. So I talk in the book about what it was like. We were in a company that was burning through money, sort of running out of cash. We didn't know how we were going to make money, and a lot of struggles, but the team was very idealistic and very motivated, and so it was a lot of fun even despite these struggles. So finally, in 2001, we figured out a revenue model which was charging suppliers to post their products online through this product called Gold Supplier. And through that, the company was really saved. And then in the book, I talk about more specifically some of the things of what were the HR systems, how did we grow from an apartment to now 30,000 people. But if I can just say a couple other stories, just so you appreciate where Alibaba came from, is we had a period during SARS. So I don't know if you all remember SARS, but SARS really swept China, and you couldn't actually do business face to face. And to make matters worse, our entire team was quarantined and had to work from home. So there were 400 of us sent home, where we ran the company from our computers in our apartments, got through SARS. The company survived, and more importantly, we found ways to help our customers do business online, because in a SARS era, they couldn't do business online. So it's just one more story of how in a crisis, you really find the opportunity, and Alibaba did this and survived SARS and became profitable. And then finally, once Alibaba.com became profitable, we saw a trend, which was that eBay was coming to China. And I know a lot of you use eBay and Amazon, and of course I respect both of those companies a lot, because a lot of people buy on Alibaba, sell on eBay. But in China, it wasn't always so much cooperation, because eBay came to China and we realized that they were going to challenge us in a big way. And so what Jack Ma did was he sort of declared war on eBay. And so now, very briefly, I'm going to walk you through how Alibaba and Taobao beat eBay in China, and then I'm going to explain why it's important for you to know this. So if you look at what happened is a lot of the small, medium-sized businesses that use eBay are also similar to the customers of Alibaba in China. And so Jack Ma realized eBay, as it brought in $180 million into the China market, he realized eBay would challenge us. So he sort of publicly declared war on eBay, all in good spirit, but he had a sort of famous saying, which is, eBay is a shark in the ocean, Alibaba is a crocodile in the Yangtze River. If we fight in the ocean, we'll lose, but if we fight in the river, we'll win. And so that's basically the metaphor, saying that the e-commerce environment in China is very different from the e-commerce environment in the US. And so we thought we could win in China. And I'll walk you through this of what made Taobao different. And the main reason, I'm so curious at some point to hear what your experiences are like using eBay and Amazon, because we built something that I think really empowered entrepreneurs. And I'm just very curious of sort of how Amazon and eBay are doing at this in the US. So what made Taobao different is this. In China, people like to get to know the buyer and seller a little bit before they do a deal. And so we made a website that was very human, in the same way that our Alibaba.com is like a trade show booth where you get to do all the work in getting to know the person, negotiating a deal. Taobao was the same way. And so we allowed a lot of chat functions so that buyers and sellers could chat online, just because chat in China is very popular. And so, for example, 6 friends might get together if they're interested in an iPhone case, and they can negotiate as a group through the chat feature and make friends, get to know the buyer or seller. And it's basically a very human way of doing business, in the same way that Main Street USA used to have little boutiques where you kind of get to know the seller, they can refer things to you, you form a sort of repeat customer experience. That's what Taobao did. And Taobao, like I mentioned, was a real form of social commerce where it's very human, and you just had groups of people who formed groups and commented on products together, shared information. And I think the most important thing is that we didn't keep the buyer and seller blind from each other. So I think on eBay, Amazon, most of the time it goes really well because you just want the product, but it's very product focused. But let's say you want to see if they have something in a different color or a different size, or you want to learn more about the seller, what makes them special, what makes them unique. There just aren't many ways to ask those kinds of questions or get to know that information on Amazon or eBay. But this was Alibaba's philosophy. And so in China, not to overwhelm you with this Twilight Zone slide here if you can see it, but in China there's something about trust. Like families trust each other, and then outside of that, friends trust each other, but maybe a little less. Outside of that, friends of friends and colleagues trust each other, but maybe not enough to do a deal always. And then on the very outer circle is strangers, and total strangers in China back 15 years ago had a very difficult time doing deals online. And probably you find that on Alibaba is that you just really don't know sometimes. So that's why Alibaba is always, I'm sure, trying to put new features and functions that give you more information about your business partner and that help you really understand who you're dealing with, to try to build greater trust. Because I think in import-export, especially if you're never meeting the person, you need as much information as you can to establish that trust. And in China, a big thing that allowed that was that Alipay, our version of PayPal, was an escrow-based system, so that the money in a shipment was held in escrow. I'm not sure. I'm guessing they do that now for some international transactions, but this was really good for building trust. And then finally, just like we had made Alibaba free for about 3 years, we said Taobao would be free for 3 years. But eBay responded by saying, you know, free is not a business model. However, very shortly after saying that, they kind of withdrew from China. Now, so why am I telling you about all this China side of things? Because I know a lot of you are focused on importing products into the US from China, but it's also important to know that in China, now Alibaba has the biggest shopping mall in the world. And between Taobao and Tmall, it's the biggest shopping mall in the world. And you may be wanting to think, if you have some China connections or thinking of new opportunities, there may even be ways for you to sell products into China, sell American products into China. So quickly, I'm going to walk you through the difference, in my view, between Amazon and what is in China on this shopping in China now. So Amazon allows maybe one little place for branding, one little banner, but it's mostly very product focused. But here's an example of the same company in China and the amount of advertising and branding they can do. So for those of you who have your own brands, creating your own brands, probably you do this through your own website now, but on Taobao in China, it's just done through their shopping mall. A lot of room for branding and information. So together, just so you understand the whole big picture of Alibaba, there's really three core pillars of Alibaba. There's the wholesale marketplace, Alibaba. There's Taobao and Tmall. And it's all connected by Alipay in China. So people will buy on Alibaba, sell on Taobao, buy on Alibaba, sell on Tmall, and of course internationally, buy on Alibaba, sell on eBay, Etsy, Amazon. And just within China, it's created this ecosystem where now, it was last year, there was $9.3 billion in sales on one 24-hour period alone in China through Taobao and Tmall. That's more than Black Friday and Cyber Monday combined. And so I know Will in his presentation talked about, yes, this is just the beginning for e-commerce. There's a lot of growth. I really think it's true, and especially you're seeing in emerging markets that there's this huge opportunity, not just in China, but elsewhere. So the way I put it is in China, things have sort of leapfrogged ahead. In the West, e-commerce is kind of the dessert, as Jack Ma says, but in China, it's the main course. And I think there are three sort of competing models now. There's the Amazon model, the strict retail model that I'm focused on, like here. Obviously, a lot of you participate in the marketplace model, but Amazon as a retailer, that model versus having your own retail website, which gets traffic from search ads. And then in China right now for consumers, the marketplace model is really, really popular. So I would say keep an eye on China because it's an exciting laboratory for e-commerce innovation. You're going to see more ideas coming from China spreading to the US. If you do decide to sell into China, there are a lot of different websites to do that through. There are a few in my slides here. And then interestingly enough, Amazon has opened a store on Alibaba's Tmall in China. So even Amazon now is selling on Tmall. And so I think it's not just China, but it's a golden era of e-commerce in emerging markets. So in India, in Africa, in Indonesia, you know, these are some of the companies that are the next Alibabas. The important thing for you all is to know that in these developing countries, e-commerce has finally started to take off, which means that more than ever, there are going to be opportunities for you because more and more people in these countries are becoming internet savvy. So you're really on the beginning of an interesting trend. And you can start thinking about, yes, importing from China and selling in the US, but even start thinking about creating your own brands that could sell on some of these other platforms internationally. And for the last slide, before opening it up for questions, really, is in the last chapter of my book, I have something called Alibaba and the 40 Lessons. And it's the sort of 40 lessons for entrepreneurs that I learned from my experience at Alibaba. And the reason I think it's important is because, you know, we all learn these things in kindergarten that we hope will apply in the business world. But sometimes it's just too hard to believe because it's easy to get cynical sometimes in business. But having watched this team grow from an apartment into this huge $200 billion company, I came up with 40 lessons. I'm going to share 10 of them with you right now. So the first is never underestimate yourself. You know, this is something where when Jack Ma and his founders of Alibaba, in the early days, they didn't think even they could run the business themselves. So they started the company and they assumed they would hand over Alibaba to, you know, the professional managers who had a lot of business experience. But I think they underestimated themselves, and over time they really realized that even they were capable of creating a great company. So as you're starting your businesses, I would say the best, most entrepreneurial companies are still run by founders, and a lot of times those founders had no business experience. So don't underestimate what you're capable of. The second is never overestimate the competition. So it's easy to get intimidated when you see the competition online or you're considering products and think other people are really strong. But I think that bigger companies are often weaker than they look, and one of the reasons is because they're big. And so as a nimble entrepreneur, don't get afraid by competition because they might talk a big talk, but as Alibaba learned when we beat eBay in China, actually we had nothing to be afraid of if we just stuck to our core values. The third thing I'll say is, one thing I learned from the experience at Alibaba is it's more important to build a team rather than a collection of all-stars. So when I joined Alibaba, we were putting together a management team of folks with MBAs, with fancy degrees, and big company experience. But like I mentioned, a lot of those folks didn't last because they didn't work well as a team. But the folks who remained worked really well as a team and chased the goal together with everyone's best interests at heart. And so I really learned that having a team instead of a collection of all-stars is very important. The fourth thing I say is Jack Ma had a saying, be as fast as a rabbit but patient as a turtle. And Alibaba has a goal of being a company that lasts 102 years. To have that kind of vision, you have to be patient as a turtle. Sometimes, you can think that things are not going well, but it just takes a lot of patience. But then, of course, being fast as a rabbit, it's important where you move quickly. You grab new product ideas as they come up, but keeping an eye on that really long-term view in a patient way as well. The next thing I say is, entrepreneurs, I think, know this intuitively, but the bigger the problem, the greater the opportunity. When Alibaba got started, everyone had all the list of problems of why e-commerce wouldn't work, but that's the opportunity. And so when Alibaba solved those problems, rather than just complain about them, then Alibaba got a bigger share of the pie. So now Alibaba has about 80% market share in China. So whatever the problem is you're trying to solve, the tougher it is, sometimes the better the opportunity. The next thing is, I think it's more important to be best than first. So if you see people out there doing something similar to what you're doing, it's more important to think, can I do it better than they are, than to think someone's already doing it. The next one I just mentioned, which is entrepreneurs don't complain about problems, they solve them. And if you find yourself surrounded by a lot of people complaining all the time, maybe it's time to change your team or join another team, because entrepreneurs really need to focus about solving problems rather than complaining about them. The next one, just as during SARS, it was a huge crisis that almost put the company out of business, but it also was a huge opportunity because we were able to help promote ourselves at a time when people couldn't meet face-to-face to do business. I would say, yeah, find opportunity in crisis. Stay calm and then find the opportunity while everyone else is panicking. Then this is an important one, I think, don't judge a company by a snapshot. Look at the overall trend. So as you look around you with your company, some of you are probably in your basement, some of you have offices. The important thing is any one-day snapshot, if anyone came to visit your company, they might think, wow, this is really unprofessional, this is really ragtag. The important thing is to look at the trend. So whenever we had new employees come to Alibaba, I had to explain to them sometimes that, well, if you think this is chaotic, you should have seen it 2 years ago, because they are maybe used to a big company way of doing business. So we had to educate people on the history of the company, where we came from, so that people viewed our progress as a trend rather than just one snapshot. Because, of course, one snapshot of a startup, you're never going to look as professional as a multinational company. And the last one for you all, again, it sounds like kindergarten advice, but I saw it happen in real life, so it gave me a lot more confidence, is dream big, really big. So, for example, I decided I was going to make a documentary. I think that was dreaming big, but then Jack Ma created a film company. I mean, that's dreaming really big. So even myself, I catch myself realizing that, the only limits we set are the ones on ourselves. We set on ourselves, and sometimes it's important to dream even bigger. So as you're getting started with your businesses, hopefully these are some tips that will help give you some advice from Alibaba's lessons learned. So that concludes my talk. Hopefully I'm still online here and I haven't just been talking to myself, but I'm really looking forward to any and all questions.
No, everybody.
Go ahead.
Great. Yeah, people have absolutely been loving it, especially that those last 10 points really been motivating people. Matthew Leclerc said, wow, these lessons are hitting so close to home, really a lot of what I've been thinking about on a daily basis. Atunji said, wow, yeah, solve them. That one was for me. So a lot of great feedback on this this whole presentation. The question box has been blown up with goodness. So yeah, you guys, if you have questions for Porter, make sure you put them in the question box. I've collected a few over the time that we've been here. But then I spent the last week and a half, 2 weeks scouring the book Alibaba's World and Crocodile and the Yangtze, Porter's documentary, and found a lot of really great things that I'm excited to ask you about, Porter. So my first question for you is about Singles Day, which is a shopping holiday that Alibaba actually invented. In 2014, Alibaba did $9.3 billion just on Singles Day. And that is, in an industry, I believe you said, that number outdoes what Amazon and eBay did together. And a much smaller percentage of China's population is online. So what does that mean for those that are starting in e-commerce, that are trying to take advantage of this massive boom in e-commerce in China as well in the U.S.?
Yeah, I think, well, the lesson I learned from the Alibaba point of view was it's just a brilliant marketing strategy. It's like China didn't have a big shopping holiday like Black Friday or Cyber Monday, so they just created it from scratch. Sometimes you don't just go with the trend, you have to create the trends. That's what they did. And I think there's now a lot of business, and Alibaba's, one of their priorities is helping U.S. companies sell into China, and Singles Day is a big day to do it. Personally, there's so much going on then that if you're just dipping your toe in, I would almost try and do it on another day so you're not lost in the crowd. But the lesson is that the biggest shopping mall now in the world is in China, and it's, I would say, in some ways tougher if you don't have experience in it. It's tougher to get up and go to China and start selling stuff in China right away. But if you have some links to China, especially where you could find a product in the U.S. that Chinese people would like and link up with someone on the ground in China who has interest in selling it, it's a really good thing, especially a niche product or a niche brand. The other thing, sort of tangible advice I'd give, is that there are companies out there that specialize in helping you sell on Tmall. So instead of just going to Tmall, if you have a product, you can talk to one of these. They're called TPs, something like Taobao partners. Talk to one of them, and they'll do the fulfillment and do the customer service for you. And you just have to have the license to have the product to take it to China. So that's one opportunity. And once you figure out China with that product, you may be able to move to India or Indonesia as those markets start to pop up.
Thank you. One of the really interesting stories from Alibaba's world is when you were talking about how Alibaba for a lot of years was struggling to become profitable. And so one of the ideas that you all had was creating Ali babies, kind of clones of Alibaba for small governments. And you ran into not only just the standard problems that tech companies trying to become profitable run into regularly, but also that you ran into a lot of government officials requiring bribes to sell any of these alley babies. So I wanted to know if this is still a challenge in China or for Alibaba, and how did you overcome these kind of extra corruption hurdles, if you will?
Well, luckily e-commerce, especially for small, medium-sized businesses, is a very overall sort of corruption-free business. But for a while we wanted to make the Chinese government our customer with these Ali babies, like mini Alibabas. And I can't say they required bribes, because when they started asking, we just decided not to do this business anymore. Corruption is really for the types of things most people are doing for the products and services on Alibaba or on Taobao. Or fortunately, it's not a really big issue because the government leaves that alone. But I think the lesson for entrepreneurs is that you might reach a point in your business where you're tempted to do something that is not only immoral but illegal. So I think people need to be really careful. You might be tempted to get into counterfeit goods or something because you can find them on Alibaba. But you know, not only do these things, they support organized crime and child labor, and if you can end up in jail with it. So we made the big decision. We said, what kind of company can we make that we're going to be proud of? And we chose a business that would be free of that kind of corruption. So some of the sellers on here probably face that, and I think it's important to just do the right thing.
Great. And Porter, I know you you mentioned you had an hour today, and it does look like if we're going to get a couple more questions, it would be later. Are you free? I don't want to tie up your time or make it difficult for you to hop off if that's what you need to do.
I've got time, so we can keep going for another 20 minutes or so.
Okay, great. Yeah, absolutely, yeah, and try to keep the pace up. So one of the interesting things in your book you wrote about during the SARS outbreak, the Chinese media kind of suppressed it, so you didn't even realize that it was going on, and you ended up at the Canton Fair, and there was only sellers, no buyers. Is that correct?
Exactly, yeah. So it was one of the things. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
So yeah, we have a lot of clients that go to the Canton Fair. Actually, Robert Neville's here. He took a large group of people there to the April Canton Fair, and wanted to see if you have any tips or insider information on how to get the most out of that fair.
Sure. Yeah, Canton Fair can be totally overwhelming. You go in with high hopes, and you're rushing around trying to do deals. So I think the important thing, this is what we told sellers as well when I was at Alibaba, is before you get to Canton Fair, you need to do a lot of work in advance. And some of that setting up meetings, so using Alibaba or whatever website to set up meetings with people who are going to Canton Fair, so that you've done a lot of that. Because if you're just wandering around the halls, you're going to be just overwhelmed. So setting up as much in advance, leaving some time, of course, just for opportunity to arise, but doing as much in advance online as possible so that you have a very productive meeting.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you. And yeah, I should mention, Will took 30 people last year to the October Fair. So we're looking forward to that.
Great.
And you guys, everybody here is going to be the first to learn about it, of course. So let's see here. The other interesting thing that happened during that SARS outbreak is you got quarantined in your apartment, and you talked about how you got kind of bored and you didn't have anything else to do. So you started playing around on the computer and started playing with Google Ads, which ended up being a really, really powerful way to reach kind of these niche sellers that you wouldn't otherwise get to meet. Were there any other moments that kind of come to mind that potentially really terrible situations or really bad, boring situations turned out to be extremely productive and beneficial in the long run?
I think the SARS outbreak was one. I think eBay coming to China, when eBay announced it was coming to China, we all felt really threatened because we were such a small company. But Jack Ma used his sort of like wushu magic on eBay. And, in martial arts training, there's a lot of talk about how to use your competitor's strength against them. And we realized that if eBay was coming to the market spending hundreds of millions of dollars advertising, that we could piggyback off of that if we could engage them in a sort of PR battle. And so every time that Alibaba or Jack Ma faced a challenge like that, we somehow found a way to find the opportunity. It wasn't obvious to me at first how to do this, but then I learned from watching Jack Ma, and I'm not joking when I say it has to do with sort of martial arts upbringing, because he used to read a lot of martial arts books. That was just sort of part of it, is that you look for ways to use your competitor's strength against them. Other opportunities, I think there are a few others in the book, but those are the most obvious ones.
Perfect, thank you. So there's a lot of, and has been, one of the kind of PR controversies. I know you handled a lot of the international PR for Alibaba, and one of the kind of the big things that eBay even attacked about was fakes on the website. And I know you said that your stance was, we shouldn't just meet the legal requirements that China requires, but we should be pioneering the solution to overcome those fakes and those kind of scammers. Did Alibaba follow through on that? What kind of solutions were you able to push through? And do you know if they're doing anything or innovating that area today?
Yeah, so I think, so when I was at Alibaba, our main thing as entrepreneurs was just to get the site up and running and doing well. And I think as an entrepreneur, you just put out fires as they come. And the counterfeit issue was an important one, but I don't think we were doing as well as we could. I think it's important for people to know, just like on eBay or Amazon, if a seller posts a counterfeit product, it's not eBay or Amazon or Alibaba's responsibility to go hunting every counterfeit and have it taken down, because often they don't know what's counterfeit and what's not. It's up to like the brand owners to contact the company and request to be taken down. So it's the same legal standard across the three. The problem is China is the environment for counterfeits is so much worse that the problem is much, much bigger over there. So I think, and actually today it was just announced, like Coach, the company that owns Coach and Gucci just sued Alibaba. Personally, I think that Alibaba's a willing partner. If a brand owner contacts them, they'll take down fake goods if it's a real fake, a legitimate request. And so I think brands now would find that they're very receptive to it, and they just announced today some sort of a QR code for fake goods that could help technically fight the problem. I think when you look at fakes, some people know it's fake and want to buy it. You can't do much about that. The worst part always is that if it's fake and someone gets it thinking it's real, then that's a really bad customer experience for everyone. But they're facing it in the same way eBay did. The only way it'll ever really get taken care of is if the Chinese government get serious about putting counterfeiters in jail. That's the only way.
Perfect. So in the book, I have this, and then one more question, and then we're going to go to the live Q&A. So when you were competing with I'm sorry, in search via Yahoo China, you recommended that Jack read The Search, a book about Google, and he didn't read it because he didn't want to copy um, copy Google strategy too much. But he said have somebody else read it, so I still can kind of benefit from the knowledge there. Um, does Jack Ma have a reading habit? And if so, kind of how does he curate that?
Well, yeah, as a young kid, he read martial arts novels all the time in China and a lot of the Chinese classics. I think he reads some business books, but I tried to give him the book, The Search about Google. He didn't want to read it. And someone else tried to give him the book called The Perfect Store, which is about eBay. He also didn't want to read it. And I think it was an important point because he was afraid he would just copy someone else if he knew them too well. And he wanted to innovate his own way. So I think those are special cases where he didn't want to copy. In the case of Taobao not copying eBay, it was the right decision. I think if he had read The Search, he might have done better with our search engine when we bought Yahoo China. I think, though, he likes to read, but like most entrepreneurs, it's tough to read entire books. And so most of his reading was done when he was a kid.
Nice. And I know you have more of a reading habit. So a lot of the people here today are curious to know, what books do you recommend for someone starting in e-commerce to kind of understand the future, or even just entrepreneurship in general?
Yeah, the first book I recommend is called Alibaba's World. It's written by a guy. No, that's my book, obviously. So assuming you've read Alibaba's World, then, books that kind of influenced me with Alibaba's World, I think, it was fun to read PayPal Wars. That was a good one. There's a book called Amazonia, which was a memoir of someone who worked at Amazon. Another one called I'm Feeling Lucky, a memoir of someone who worked at Google. And then for entrepreneurs, let me think what other things. Yeah, those are the ones that come to mind right now.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, Alibaba's World is honestly the best starting point if you guys are looking for a good entrepreneurship e-commerce book to read, because it is literally written from the ground up for someone in your situation who is starting an e-commerce business specifically and is concerned with the environment and works with Alibaba every day. Yeah, it's really just was it instructive stories and just quick tips at the end. Really well put together. I've enjoyed it a ton. So my last question before we get to the audience questions today is that Alibaba was kind of forced to hire the farmers' children and not able to afford kind of graduates who were being hired by large multinationals early on. And you mentioned in the book that these farmers' kids, these rural kids who were hungry for opportunity, had a level of energy and just kind of a hunger that the college graduates did not have. Did that influence Alibaba's hiring methods or kind of behavior in the future, or did they start hiring the college kids as soon as they could afford them?
Yeah, that's a great example, and another example of finding opportunity in crisis. So, when the internet bubble burst in 2000, no one wanted to join an internet company. I mean, it was hard to find people because all the parents would say, "Why would you join an internet company? The internet was a bubble. It's sort of a dead industry." But the opportunity was that there were people who, because other industries were being hurt, there were people we could get maybe at a lower salary if we offered more stock options. And a lot of times people coming from more tough circumstances have the most hunger and the most desire to prove themselves. And so we found people who, a lot of times, like you said, from the countryside or with no real business background, and we gave them stock options to keep them for a real long time. And then they worked really, really hard. So when the economy's bad, sometimes they say that's the best time to start a company because you can get employees and the sort of wages are lower and people are maybe more hungry because it's the only opportunity they have. So I think that's one more example of finding an opportunity in a crisis.
Great. So Ranger Bob Neville wants to know, what are the 2 to 3 traits of that core team from 1999 into 2001? What were some of the most important aspects of their character?
Sure. The first is that most of them had started their career as a teacher or as a journalist or not as business people, and so they had an idealism. Sometimes people are very skeptical when you say your goal is to change the world, but I personally think that's one reason that Alibaba succeeded is the founders sort of measured their success based on how much they're impacting the world, like you would if you're a teacher or a journalist, rather than on how much money they're making that day. Of course, everyone loves more money than less, but it's a better byproduct. And these were people who were focusing on that long-term goal. A lot of them are billionaires now, but it's not because they were chasing billions of dollars. It's because they were focused on these other goals. The second is, this is a really important one, is they were always willing to put the company's interests above their own self-interest. So, when staff make a decision, you want them to make a decision that helps the company, even if it means, hurting their own interests, because at the end of the day, the team realized that they could rotate and shift around as long as they focused on the main goal. And then I'd say the last one is, when I was at Alibaba, my title changed 8 times in 8 years. And this was true of a lot of those early founders, that we all rotated in and out of new positions. And that was a really great skill the company had, was moving people around who maybe they did really poorly. Like I saw an example of someone who was put in charge of the sales team in one of the cities. He was terrible at sales, but they put him in charge of one of the websites, and actually he was amazing at that. And he rose to become one of the top people in all of Alibaba. So it's realizing that you might have the right person, but in a company that's growing quickly, you might have the right person but in the wrong position. And knowing how to keep that good person and rotate them into another position is really important.
Robert's second question is, what is your dream for the future of world commerce?
Well, that's a big question, but actually I have a big answer for that. So, the reason I've spent time traveling around to Nigeria and India and Indonesia since leaving Alibaba is, I think e-commerce is the best hope we have to lift a lot of developing countries out of poverty. And so when you're sourcing on internationally, I know there are a lot of people who think you should only buy from America, but personally, when you see people's lives being affected and e-commerce really bringing them out of poverty, so that's why I'm trying to just share the Alibaba story because I think it can, e-commerce and entrepreneurs are the best hope we have to help these countries lift themselves out of poverty.
Thanks. Yeah, that's super interesting. We're gonna get into, it looks like, some more kind of nitty-gritty questions, a little bit more. Wants to know if Alibaba is planning on getting into selling services the way Amazon is.
So again, I sort of read the headlines now, and I sort of read between the lines, but I don't have real information about what their plans are. But you know, they have a cloud, so they're doing. They have a cloud division doing that. They're a huge ecosystem in China and internationally, so they are, I think, selling different sort of forms of data to people. They are getting into banking in China. They are getting into media production. Services, you know, we had a platform where we tried to connect service providers, but we always found e-commerce worked better for us for physical products. But they're moving into a lot of things, mostly in China. Internationally, they'll probably just focus on two things. One is selling through AliExpress to entrepreneurs and other people, and through Alibaba. And the other one is helping U.S. companies get into China. So I think those are the main two things in America they're going to focus on.
Great. Aaron Fraser asks, what is the natural progression of negotiation in China? I've read that it's done in 3 stages where they expect the opening offer to be declined. Does that carry over to Alibaba, or would that be more specific to something like the Canton Fair?
I think, yeah, that negotiation in China is just expected, especially in you know, like a wholesale large volume. And I think it's important to know that, like I talked about, trust being important in China. The more you can build a relationship and somehow build trust, the better your chances are of negotiating a good deal. So if you're finding yourself getting very serious about some deals or suppliers, getting on a plane and meeting the supplier and going out to dinner with them, and it's a way to build greater trust, which will probably lead to better deals. So I think people always expect and that there will be a lot of negotiation. So the first offer that you get from a supplier on a price shouldn't be the last. I almost think that's almost unheard of. But there's a lot of room for negotiation. But don't forget that just focusing on the price without focusing a little on building some rapport, this is what Will talked about, is building rapport with the person. I think that's very important.
There's actually a question specifically about that. DOS, you know, what is the fastest way to establish that trust, that rapport with the factory?
I don't know if it's the fastest. The best way is to meet face to face at some point. Obviously, if it's a really small order, that's not going to help. But maybe even something as simple as when you're discussing with them, getting on a video Skype. Now, be aware that some suppliers in China aren't very comfortable with their English skills, so they prefer putting things in email or in messages. But to get on Skype, and that's the closest you can get to looking each other in the eye, I think that helps. And I think that's the best way. It's just, and make your emails, you'll notice that you get emails that have this kind of flowery language, like, you know, let's work together to build a mutually beneficial partnership. It might seem a little bit ridiculous, but having a little bit extra friendly email more than feels natural is another way.
Great. Yeah, that's a great tip. Thank you. Uh, so Jim Foyle, you talked about this a little bit earlier on, but he asks, how did Porter decide to leave Alibaba after the long stint and seeing the fruits of his labor develop?
Yeah, I write in the book that knowing when to join a startup is hard, but knowing when to leave a startup sometimes even harder because you put a lot into it, but leaving at the right time is important because in a startup you need to put in 110% or your relationships and your contributions can really go downhill quickly. And I had been there for about 8 years. I had moved from city to city 8 times, and I saw some great things, which eBay had pulled out of the market, so we had a really clear running field ahead of us. Um, and then we had just had one of our companies go public, so Alibaba.com had just gone public, and so I thought it was a natural time to leave while I could still be proud of carrying the baton for a while, but hand the baton to someone else who was more fresh and able to run, faster than I was.
And we got just two more questions here. Aaron asked, what is the biggest mistake that purchasers make when using Alibaba?
Um, the biggest mistake, although probably everyone using Alibaba now on here is more savvy than this, but the biggest mistake for the first time is people assume that just because you can buy one tennis racket on Amazon, that you can buy 10,000 tennis rackets on Alibaba and it'll be the same smooth process. So I think in Will's free webinar slides, he talked about how it's good to start small and ramp up, limit your risk. So I think the biggest mistake is making too big of an order too soon. It's better to, like I said, it's like a dating website. You don't just marry someone that you meet on a dating website and click right away. You need to get to know them. So just like you would go for a coffee for the first date, just order a few samples and get to feel comfortable before making a bigger order.
Thank you, yeah, so much. And this last one comes from Rose Mena. Says, how can we find out more about Porter and what he does in the future? Where should everybody go?
Um, that's a good question. I have Twitter, but I don't use it that much. But actually, you can follow me on Twitter. So it's at Porter Erisman. And to find out more, obviously, I'll give one more plug for the book. I mean, the book gives a good overview of sort of, not my story, but Alibaba's story, but through my eyes. And yeah, I just say follow me on Twitter. I'm going to start using it a little bit more. And I'm coming out with another book in about a year and a half, which is about e-commerce in emerging markets. So keep an eye out for that too.
Absolutely. There's actually, if we can squeeze one more question in.
Sure.
First of all, there's 20 people at least that have said they've bought your book while
Wow.
here tonight. So yeah, people are grabbing it like crazy. I'm really excited about that. But also there's a bunch of questions. 3 or 4 people asked, and I was going to let this go until you just mentioned the topic of your next book. But how can, and obviously this is something that you're delving into now, but how can people, take advantage of those emerging markets, in Africa and countries that it's not, the opportunity isn't quite as obvious as a market like the U.S.
Yeah, I think that the important lesson is sort of Alibaba. So what did Alibaba do? What's its contribution to the world of e-commerce? Is it found a way for e-commerce to work in developing countries where Amazon and eBay weren't able to crack the code. Now the good news is they did that, and now in China there's this huge online shopping mall. The one thing is all these other companies I've been talking to in India and Nigeria, they shifted from doing the Alibaba or the Amazon model to the Alibaba model. So I would say it's going to take time. I'd say probably a year and a half, 2 years before these things become really viable marketplaces for the small sellers, because they're just now building the infrastructure. So if you do try to start selling internationally, just keep an eye on it. China would be one of the first places to go, and then keep an eye on it because in India there are several companies, Flipkart, Snapdeal, even Amazon in India, and Tokopedia in Indonesia, Konga.com in Nigeria. They're still a little bit ways off before like having a boom time, but just keep an eye on it because you always want to go where the opportunity is, and I think in the next couple of years that'll be popping up.
Perfect. Well, yeah, again, thank you so much, Porter. Everybody, if you haven't bought Alibaba's World, definitely do it. There's no more perfect book for what you're trying to build now. I know, Will, what do you think?
Yeah, definitely. That was amazing. Thanks, Porter. It's so good to get an inside look at Alibaba. You know, we talk about it so much and kind of try to infer what's going on and the best strategies, you know, from the outside looking in. It's great to hear that you kind of agree with a lot of what we've kind of figured out for our clients. And yeah, just amazing to hear your insight as to where this is going in the future as well. So thanks a lot, Porter.
Thanks so much. Like I said, it's a dream come true that there's a community of entrepreneurs now building businesses based on this platform we built. So it's just an honor.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and I think it's only growing from here. So awesome stuff. Yeah, so Porter, give me 1 second here. Don't leave yet. Let me keep you for one more minute here. I just wanted to announce really quick, everyone. Porter and his publisher were nice enough to give you guys 15 free copies of Alibaba's new World, Porter's new book. So we're going to announce that in the Facebook group in just an hour or two here. So make sure you keep an eye on the Facebook group. We will have the details of that giveaway for you guys. Whole bunch of free books for you guys. So really awesome for that. And yeah, so in general, thanks, Porter. If you guys want to get Porter's book, just head to Alibaba, or sorry, head to Amazon and just type in Alibaba's World. Or you can go to startupbros.com/Porter, and he also has his documentary, which you can get from Google or just startupbros.com/movie. And we'll have links for all of those for you guys in just a little bit here. So thanks again, Porter, for being here. It was really awesome. You know, I guess, do you have any parting words for these guys? All these guys are, you know, out there trying to use all these tools, trying to kind of stake their claim in this e-commerce revolution that's happening. What's like your number one piece of advice? Above and all, you know, what should these guys be doing as they build their businesses?
I would say just e-commerce, the best thing about it is you can get started pretty much risk-free and then ramp up once you get going. And so you can start small and then ramp it up once things start working. And, you know, stick to it, because at Alibaba we faced a lot of people saying our idea was crazy, it'll never work. And ultimately it worked out through a lot of ups and downs. So, you know, just those things I mentioned, like those things you learn in kindergarten, they also apply in business sometimes. So good luck to you, and don't forget to dream big about your businesses.
Awesome. Great advice from an awesome guy. Yeah, thanks a lot, Porter. Thanks for staying late with us today and everything. Really going above and beyond for these guys. Guys, we'll have a recording up of this presentation in just a couple hours, along with all the links that we've talked about and all that good stuff, the giveaway. So make sure you keep an eye on the Facebook group. All right. Thanks again to Porter, and thanks again to you guys for being here. I see the question box just blowing up. They really love this, Porter. So yeah, awesome. Thanks again, everyone, and have a great night. Oh, and thanks to Kyle too, if you want to say your goodbyes, Kyle.
One last request from Porter. You know, doing
Oh yeah, no. Again, Porter, thank you so much.
Oh yeah, thanks. I'll say one last request. Doing a book is like a startup. So you all are entrepreneurs. So if you like the book, please review it on Amazon and tell your friends, because it's just like a startup, just like what you all are doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So guys, get out there. Even if you don't purchase the book, guys, I would really, you know, go leave a review. Go put it on your wish list. You guys know how to blow up products on Amazon. Help Porter out and kind of repay him for staying an extra 45 minutes with you today, doing an extra Q&A. And yeah, go check out his book on Amazon. even if you're not purchasing it, make sure you leave a review, you give it a thumbs up, 5, whatever it is. You guys know how to blow up those Amazon products. So that's the least we could do for this awesome session. So thanks again, Porter.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Cool. All right, guys. I will see you tomorrow for the next weekly session. And yeah, keep an eye on the Facebook group. Thanks again, everyone. Goodbye.